the square root of 1% of the population meditating at the same time can shift the consciousness of the planet. And it was like a lightning bolt struck me. And that was the moment that I realized I had the power for great light and the power for great darkness. And I got to choose what I fed. And after that, that catalyzed my personal development journey. And about 11 years ago, I learned transcendental meditation, and that became a daily practice. As I mentioned, I have not missed a day of meditation for the last 11 years. I've studied Kabbalah, meditation, many things, and that leads me to my current journey with PSSM. And because of what wound up happening with COVID, we then decided once a week for 52 weeks to be able to do these global meditations with world thought leaders. And there was a press release that went out, and PSSM reached out and said, we have this phenomenal thought leader named Patriji, so God rest him, and thank you for all the work he has done. Hello, my name is Jennifer K. Hill. I'm joining you from the United States originally, now via Lisbon, Portugal. I've had quite the interesting life experience and journey. As I often say when I'm doing talks around the world, hi, I'm Jen Hill. I'm a recovering and most of the time that's met with a lot of laughter because people know me and they see that I've been meditating for 11 years and I'm deeply, deeply spiritual. I spend about 2 hours a day in prayer and meditation. So when I tell people I'm a jerk, or at least a recovering jerk, that normally raises an eyebrow or two. So let me rewind and tell you a little bit about how this story came to pass. When I was very young, the reason a lot of us wind up being jerks is that we actually don't love ourselves. And I was very much one of those people. I was bulimic, I was suicidal, I was depressed, I couldn't understand myself or anybody else. And around that time, I needed anything, a miracle, to get me out of the situation I was in. Well, the funny thing about miracles is they often do not come in the package that we expect them to. So I started dating a guy, and I had kind of this divine wisdom at the time, despite not being super spiritual yet. I saw it as a sign from my grandfather, who was my hero, who had passed away about 7 months earlier. And my grandfather was a Marine, which is something in the United States, which is a form of military. And so one day I meet this guy, and he happens to have the Marine Corps birthday, November 10th. And I thought, this is a sign. So we start dating, but as I mentioned, I was a bit of a jerk. So shortly after I began dating this man, he took a personal development class, and he was one of those guys who's like, rah, rah, this is the best class I've ever done. And I was the sort of person back then who said, you can't make me. So he's super excited about it. He does this class, and for 8 months, all I hear about is this silly class, right? So this happens. I'm not very spiritual at the time, and around 8 months in, I decide one day that I will take this class. However, I am not taking this class out of the kindness of my heart because I want transformation. I am taking this class to prove it is a bunch of BS or cult, basically. So I show up day one to this class, and I literally had a shirt, forgive me for saying this, that said Von on it, because I was labeling myself. I mean, that's how I really saw myself. To give you a little bit of a context, that was the lens that I saw myself through, is to some extent I would say I saw myself as, for less of a better word. And fast forward, it's the first day of the class, and I'm there in this special shirt, and the man who's leading it up there in a room full of 200 people, he says, oh, does anybody have any questions for us? Yes, you over there in the Von Bit shirt? So I stand up and I say, how would you respond to the fact that this, meaning the class, is a cult? The man looks at me, gives a little chuckle, looks at the audience and says, if it is a cult, it's the best damn cult you'll ever join. Next question. So I am sitting there the whole time, 3 days, 12, 14, 16 hours a day, and I am stewing in self-righteousness and judgment of myself and others. Now keep in mind, at this moment, I'm still bulimic, I'm depressed, and I have zero love for myself. But I'd rather judge other people than look at myself and turn inwards. So at the end of the class, it all culminates and it's a big celebration, and my boyfriend is sitting there to my left, and this tall Aussie woman comes up with her cute Aussie accent, and she says, oh, How's the class? Are you going to take the advanced class? I looked at her. I said, sweetheart, darling, it was stifling enough having sat in this room the last 3 days. Do you really think I would put myself through this hell again? I look over at my boyfriend and he shrugs and he says, don't get me started. It took her 8 months just to do this one. So as he says this, it's those moments before and after. Whenever I get asked the question of how and when did I have that moment, that epiphany of spirituality, this was that moment where the train could have gone one way or the other. I looked at my boyfriend and I said, this is an at-will relationship. You can leave anytime you want. The woman who was facilitating the class looks at me and says, can I be really straight with you? And I said, sure, darling. In my most condescending voice, go ahead, be really straight with me. She said, you are a nasty thing. You are one of the most powerful women that I've ever met in my life. Except you know what? You are using your powers to destroy people. You are like Godzilla walking through a city with a huge tail swinging behind you, knocking down buildings wherever you go. Except you know what? Those are not buildings that you're destroying. Those are people's lives. Takes one look at my boyfriend, says, leave her. It's what she needs. And walked away. After I picked my jaw up off the floor, I said, what? And I went in my office the next day and 25 of us or so in a meeting, and I was already somewhat successful there. I was very young, like 23 years old. And I said to everybody, because I was kind of curious, was I really that big of a jerk? And I just had no idea, and it was this big blind spot. So I went into the office and I said, guys, have I ever been condescending or demeaning to any of you or rude? The office went so silent you could hear a pin drop, until one woman bursts out laughing and says, oh my gosh, you are only the most condescending, demeaning we've ever met, and I have no idea how you're successful. And that was the moment that I realized I had the power for great light and the power for great darkness, and I got to choose what I fed. And after that catalyzed my personal development journey, and shortly thereafter I began studying different spiritual work. And about 11 years ago, I learned transcendental meditation, and that became a daily practice. As I mentioned, I have not missed a day of meditation for the last 11 years. I coupled that with a lot of other personal development work that I've done. I've studied Kabbalah, meditation, many things, and that leads me to my current journey with PSSM. It was around probably summertime of 2020. We all remember that fateful time. And shortly before that, I had been in Paris on March 6th of 2020. I had just done my first interview in the United States with Deepak Chopra, who became a friend of mine. And I'm just sitting there in Paris. This is before the COVID thing exploded. And I'm sipping a glass of wine and reading a book by Greg Braden called Divine Matrix. And I'm just paying attention to nothing but my book. And I get to this one line in the book that says, the square root of 1% of the population meditating at the same time can shift the consciousness of the planet. And it was like a lightning bolt struck me. And all of a sudden, I don't even know what possessed me, because Deepak and I had barely known each other 2 months. So I called Deepak and I said, Deepak, this is Jen Hill. Yes, Jennifer. I said, I'm getting a message that we need to do a global meditation to help people. Luckily, I know folks at the Kabbalah Center, at HeartMath, and so we gathered together all sorts of leaders from around the world for this global meditation on March 9th, which was a huge success. And because of what wound up happening with COVID, we then decided once a week for 52 weeks to be able to do these global meditations with world thought leaders. And there was a press release that went out, and PSSM reached out and said, we have this phenomenal thought leader named Patriji, so God rest him, and thank you for all the work he has done. And they said, we'd love to have you interview Patriji about his work with PSSM and talk about the 22,000 pyramids he's built. So my interest was piqued. I was getting a lot of responses at the time for interviews. And I was so honored. I think it was July of 2020 that Patriji joined me I learned all about the type of meditation at PSSM, which I was not as familiar with. I had tried other types before that. And he played the flute, of course, which was magical. And then Pari and I stayed in touch. And of course, I practiced this among other types of meditation. And probably the most profound experience I've had with PSSM just happened this morning. So as I began by sharing, sometimes the biggest obstacles in life can lead to the greatest miracles and gifts. So this morning, we are so grateful to get to be here for the mega meditation event for 11 days. I'm a girl who likes to get like 8 to 12 hours of sleep. Like 8 hours, okay, I'll suffer that. 10 hours, sweet spot to 12 hours. So I hadn't been sleeping well for a few nights. I specifically didn't go out and dance last night. 10 p.m. I go to bed, and I told our beautiful host here, I said, I'm so sorry, I need to sleep until 6:30. I wake up and my friend who's with me, Amy, her alarm goes off, and I'm like, okay, and I must have dreamt it that she said, Jen, it's 5:30, and I was like, oh, okay, it's not 6:30, but I'll get up and at least catch part of the morning meditation. So I get up, I started to make a coffee, started to figure things out, and I look at my phone, it's like 4 a.m., not 5:30, so I had dreamt the whole thing. Well, now I am not happy. I'm like, you just haven't slept well for a while, so you're just kind of cranky, you're making a coffee and drinking it, not the most fun person to be around. Well, thank God for spiritual tools like meditation and another technique that I often teach for removing limiting beliefs. On the car ride over here, I say my morning prayers. We sit down, and I had actually asked God, I said, God, do you want me to go back to bed, or do you want me to stay up with Amy? And I heard stay up, even though I was like, oh, I really don't want to, I really want to sleep. So the hardest thing I could have possibly done this morning was to have gone to our global meditation from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. About a half hour into the meditation, the music is enrapturing, it's surrounding all of us. And I've never in my life had this happen. I'm just doing our normal PSSM meditation style. I'm following the breath, and then the music took me over. And I had a pure experience of ecstatic dance and bliss that I have never, the word I would use is enraptured. I was enraptured by being with the breath and with the music. And out of that experience, everything changed. And that experience was immediately followed by miracle after miracle, all these miracles all day long, even getting to be here right now, because there were a lot of bumps along the road, as there often are to finding miracles. And one of the greatest miracles is when I was younger, I was made fun of for dancing because I was often like awkward and choppy. And today I was offered to dance on stage in front of everybody at the audience. And it was really one of the greatest breakthroughs I've ever had, since I used to be very self-conscious. So if I could give one piece of advice, my piece of advice is, don't be afraid of the greatest challenges that life puts in front of you. When life gives you a challenge, when you wake up at 4 a.m. thinking it's 5:30 a.m., or when there's traffic, or when someone betrays you, know that you are inches so close to receiving the most profound miracle you might ever receive in your life. I am Jennifer Cahill, and it's a pleasure. Thank you for listening.